welcome back to the MOOC course on research writing. I am Aradhana Malik and I am helping you with this course, and we are now beginning with the third week of classes, and we are going to start with discussion on the section on methodology. What is methodology? How do you write it up? What are the things that you take care of while writing up the section? So let's see what we have for you here. Okay, what is methodology? Now, we often confuse we are often confused between using the word method and methodology. And methodology is nothing but an extended review of the methods you shortlisted before the final selection. Method is the way you do things. Method is the way you conduct your study. Methodology is a study of the methods, and we often get confused between these two terms and we use them interchangeably. So that is not what this is. We critique available methods in methodology. What we do is we try and, once we've narrowed down our research question, we try and find out how that question can be answered using the available methods. So we collect the most suitable methods, and then we review the most suitable methods that we think are suitable for answering the question that we have at hand, and then we critique them. There is a difference between critique and criticism. Critique means to compare and contrast, or to find out the positives and the negatives of between the different methods available to us. So we find out what in the available method suits our interest, and what in the available method does not suit or does not help us answer the question that we have set out to answer. Okay. So how do we critique them? We try to find out who used the specific method and how and when, under what circumstances was the specific method used. What were their experiences with that method? What were the experiences of the people who used the method with that method, whether they found it useful, whether they ran into some trouble, whether it took longer or shorter than what they had expected, what kinds of conditions was the method applicable in, etc. How do those experiences inform you about that particular method? Now, we all have our unique circumstances. We all work in different settings. For example, if somebody were to study the impact of the physical environment on mood swings of different people. So let's talk about the impact of the temperature, the outside temperature, on, say, the moods or emotional expressions of people in the workplace. Now, if we go through a study that talks about, or that has evaluated people, say, in Himachal Pradesh, I am talking specifically about India. So maybe in Shimla, a study was conducted in Shimla, within and the sample that was selected was students in Himachal Pradesh University. Now, in Shimla, temperatures rarely go above 30 degrees Celsius. So, for most part of the time, the outside temperature is less than 30, plus the humidity is not there. It's sultry, it's humid only in the monsoon months and maybe sometimes in the winter months when it's snowing outside. So now when we take that study and try and apply the findings of that study to, say, a study that is going to be conducted in Bhubaneswar, for example, or maybe even Puri, which is in Orissa. Puri is a coastal town, and so we take that study and we say, okay, we are talking about how the outside temperature affects the emotional expression of students in, say, a university or in an institute of higher education, and we take that finding and then we apply it to students in a totally different setting. Here in Puri, the temperatures rarely go below 30 degrees Celsius. Okay, so it's not very cold. For the most part of the year, the temperatures are very high, and so that can have a very different kind of influence on the type of results that we are talking about. So we find out how these experiences, it does, maybe that study tells us, I'm just taking a hypothetical study, maybe the outcome of such a study is that yes, the outside temperature has an impact on the emotional expression of students in institutes of higher education, and these students going to Himachal Pradesh University are affected by the temperatures, when the temperature goes up or down, or when it snows, or when the sun comes out after snow. So all of that has an impact. But when we take the same findings and we transport them and we try and use the study, it is informing us, but the setting is totally different, the context is totally different. For the most part, students are sweating instead of shivering, you know. So the context is different. It is informing us in the sense that the temperature does affect the students, but to what degree and in what settings, that has to be defined. So that is what we must write down, and we say, okay, this study was conducted in Himachal Pradesh, which is a cold place. I am conducting a study in Orissa, Bhubaneswar and Puri, to be very specific, and that is a warm and humid place. So the outcome is likely to be different. The impact will be there, but to what extent and what kinds of emotions are affected are likely to be different, and together these two studies may inform the knowledge base about something totally different. So that may add value together to the knowledge base. Okay. Details of your method including description of procedures, samples if applicable. So all of that has to be included in the methodology section. You study various methods, you try and list the context in which that particular method was used, what were the experiences, how does it inform you about the study, how is it different from what you are expecting to study. Then you also include the details of your method, including the procedures that were used, the samples that were collected and selected for the study, and the samples that were put through this particular or put through different methods. Now, some examples of reviews of methods. Some methods, some places where we can find reviews of methods. One is the quantitative method scales. You know, we have these scales that are used to study human behavior. We could also have other techniques, and we would also have critiques and review. So different people who have used different methods, we find out what they have done, what their experiences were, what were the limitations they ran into, and then we take those reviews and we study them and we mention them in the methodology section. Okay. How do you review available methods for collection, analysis and application? You write down the name and description of each method, various parameters on which the reviews can be, or on which methods can be reviewed are. One is, of course, you write down the name and description of the method. Then you talk about who created that method, who put that method in place, who generated that method, who came up with that method, the year of discovery or creation or publication of that method. So when we are only looking at published material, we are not looking at something that somebody said. Maybe that will work in say action research, but it is always a good idea to look at published material. So even in the publication, people will say, okay, this method was finally published in say the year 1964, but the method has been in use since 1958. Fair enough, you mentioned that. Okay, so you write down the year of discovery or creation or publication of that method. For say methods in the study of medicine, I mean, medicine, the whole field of medicine is built on case studies. It is not quantitative research, it's purely qualitative. To a large extent, it's qualitative because no two human bodies function alike. So many methods have been in use for maybe thousands of years. For example, let's take the example of bringing down the fever of a person, of a human being. Now, using a cold compress, which is cloth soaked in cold water on the forehead of a person or on the hands of a person to bring down fever, is a method that dates back centuries. I don't think anyone knows when this method came into existence. This was purely out of common sense or you know, just a hit and try thing that people discovered, that if you put a cold compress on a person, on a febrile person's forehead or hands or feet, the fever does come down. So if you want to write about that method, you may not be able to trace it back. So at that point of time, it may be a good idea to write down when this method was actually started, or when it was published, and how people justified the use of this method. So that would help. Then what was the method originally designed for? Many times we use methods that were originally designed for one thing but are in use for something different. So what was the method originally designed for? What does the method accomplish? An idea of the result categories, traits measured, processes, etc. Okay, what is the method originally used to accomplish? So maybe you could write down why the method came into place, in what context was it published, how was it used, and what was it originally designed to measure. The reliability. Now reliability and validity I will deal with together. Reliability is the number of times a method produces the same result. That is reliability. So, and reliability is quantified, especially in the social sciences. Reliability can be quantified. Reliability is the number of times the use of the same method in the same context yields similar results. Validity is how well a specific method answers the question that you have set out to ask. Validity tells you about the fit between the answer of a question and the question itself. So and validity is also quantified. So it's always a good idea, especially in the social sciences, when you're writing down these methods or when you're trying to review methods, it's always a good idea to write down the reliability and the validity, especially if it has been quantified. Okay. Then the time taken to administer a particular method, that really is an important factor while determining whether a particular method can be used. Many times it's, say for example, you're using questionnaires. Now a questionnaire that takes 2 hours or 3 hours to respond to can be used if you have that kind of a captive audience. These days people don't have that kind of time. So if you're looking at a sample that doesn't have that kind of time, using a questionnaire that takes maybe 2 or 3 hours may not be such a good idea, unless you cannot find another method that serves your purpose just as well. Okay, so the time taken to administer a particular method would be helpful. Another example could be in the pure sciences or in the engineering sciences. If you are trying to use a method that takes maybe that requires an uninterrupted power supply for maybe 24 to 48 hours, and you are in a place where there are frequent power cuts, unless you have a power backup that can sustain for that long, it may not be such a good idea to choose a method that requires an uninterrupted power supply for say 24 to 48 hours, because you will have to rerun the program or the process again and again and again if there is a power cut. The target. We are talking about specifically for the social sciences, the age group, specific material the method can be used for, etc. The applicability to your work. How does this specific method help you answer the question you have set out to answer, and how does the specific method then lay down the foundation for future work. So that is again a very, very important factor in determining whether you should be using the specific method or not. Critiques of different methods. Now in some methods you will see that a lot of people have used a particular method and they have not found the method to be useful. It's like going through the reviews on a popular e-commerce website. We go through these reviews before selecting what to buy. I know many of you would be online shoppers just like I am. If you're living by yourself, and if you have or if you want to buy things that are not available within your vicinity, you would probably be an online shopper, and you would look at how people review a particular item, knowing fully well that these e-commerce websites hire people to write these reviews for them. However, you would still go through the reviews like I do when you're trying to buy something. Similarly, while selecting a method, these critiques help. Knowing how people who have used that method have or have experienced that method is very helpful in deciding, whether you want to use that method or not. And then on the basis of all of these parameters and some more that you might find useful for your specific study, maybe the availability of the sample could be one criterion. You may want to use a particular method, but the specific sample on which the method can be used is not easily available, or it is expensive. Maybe the price could be one more parameter. At times there are methods that are available, but they are just not within your research budget. So all of these things are different factors that help you determine the choice of method, and when you write up the methodology section, putting all of these in clear cut in detail helps you justify your choice of method that you finally choose for your study. And let me show you a tool that I use for this purpose for my studies. Okay, this is what I like to do. Now this is called an infographic. This is a table. What you do is you select different methods based on the reviews that you have, and when you conduct a thorough study of the methods available to you, you will find that at the end of that study you will come across, or you'll be able to shortlist about 8 or 10 or 12 different methods that seem most appropriate to answer the question you have asked. You can't use all those 8, 10, 12 methods. So what do? You then put them out in the form of a table, and over here in the parameters section you write down here. Let me show you how I like to do it, and that's why I kept it empty. Okay. So in the parameters section you write down, say maybe the time taken for cost, maybe the year in which the method was developed, could also have a bearing on your choice of the method. In the social sciences specifically, things change with time. So maybe the year in which this particular method was developed and has been used, maybe the last critique you found for a particular method that was developed in the year 1960 was from the year 1985. Now in India there has been an information boom. There has been the internet has invaded our lives, and the internet invaded India sometime in the mid 1990s, and so anything that came after 1985 would have had a strong impact or would have been influenced by the advent of the internet. And now we are at a stage where everybody carries 1 or 2 cell phones. Your local vendor, your local rickshaw wala who may not have a permanent home to stay because he has migrated from a different state to be in your state and to work in your state, he would not have a permanent place to stay, but he would probably be carrying 2 cell phones, one to stay in touch with his home and the other to stay in touch with his customers. So the internet has invaded our lives. So the year of development and use of a particular method would have an impact in this situation. If there was a method that was developed, say to be used before the internet invaded our lives, I'm talking specifically about the social sciences, that may not be very applicable here. The year of development could be one criterion. Again, you would have different criteria depending on what you're doing. Okay, and then you could have reliability, and you could add as many columns. And you could have another column in which you could put validity, and you could put all of these parameters here in this table. You make a table and everything becomes clear, and then you explain each cell of the table. Whenever we write tables, it is always a good idea to provide a very crisp, clear-cut description or statements, a set of statements about what the table includes. And then this helps you convince the person reading your document about what you are doing and about your choice of method. So, and you could just keep adding to this depending on your own specific question. Now, what does methodology influence? Methodology influences your choice of method. When you study, your methodology is specifically aimed at helping you narrow down or helping you arrive at a decision regarding the method you would like to use for your study. So, your choice of method is critical here, and within that method, the tools and techniques of data collection, how will you collect, what method you will use, will in turn determine what kinds of tools and techniques you will use for data collection. The sampling strategies and the quantity and quality of sample, quantum of sample, how many people are you going to interview, how many traits are you going to measure, etc. Tools and techniques of data organization. Depending on the kind of data you collect and the volume of data you collect, your data organization will be influenced by how well or how thoroughly you conduct your methodology. So, this class you will say, but this class is only about research writing. When we write about research, the way you present it will help you justify each of these things. If you put everything out in the form of a table and you say this is the method I am using, but even within this method I am going to use only this part of the method and not the other part. Okay. Tools and techniques of data preservation. Now, data needs to be preserved for future use, for future reference, to justify that you have done your work well. So, all of this will be influenced by your choice of method, which in turn will depend upon your methodology section and how well and how crisply you present it. So, my advice to you is, when you are writing up your methodology, please initially in the first draft be as verbose, as detailed as you would like to be. That will really help you. Then cut down and make it as crisp as possible. I have said this time and again, and I say this to my students also. You need to be prepared for 40 to 50 drafts of any document that you write before you send it finally for approval or publication. It is not possible to write a good document without that many revisions. It is just not possible, even for those of us who have a very good grasp over our language, over our concepts. Unless our draft goes through at least 40 to 50 revisions, it is not it may be accepted in less credible publications, but in order to produce a top notch, a top class document, your document must go through 40 to 50 revisions. And that is why, don't be scared, write down everything and then slowly cut it and tailor it and make it as crisp as possible to fit into this table. Now, many times these tables can run into several pages. That is all right. That's absolutely all right, because this kind of a table, this is one way of doing it. You could come up with another way. This is the way I like to do it, but you could come up with another way. The idea is to evaluate the methods on the basis of several parameters and come up with a solid, robust justification of the method you would like to use. So, if you can come up with a better method, please share it on the blog and we will all benefit from your ideas. So, I would really encourage you to do that. Okay. Okay. And that is all we have time for in this lecture. We will continue with some more discussion on research writing in the next class. Thank you very much for listening.